I'm Jack from the ExpensePlus team, and today we're going to be looking at bank reconciliation and petty cash. And we're going to split today's session into four different sections, really. We're going to start with an overview of the bank reconciliation process within ExpensePlus and how you can efficiently reconcile your transactions. We'll then cover how to reconcile the different types of transactions within ExpensePlus, including some of the more unusual types that maybe you haven't come across yet, or you have and you're not quite certain how to reconcile them, or you might find them cropping up in the future. We'll then talk about payment processor accounts and how we can manage those in ExpensePlus before covering petty cash and again, how to manage that within ExpensePlus. So we'll start, as I say, with bank reconciliation. And before we dive into the real details, we just wanted to step back a second and explain how bank reconciliation works within the overall process flow within ExpensePlus. So you can see on my screen, I have the dashboard for ExpensePlus open, and it shows us some of the different modules within ExpensePlus and how they work together. So for those newer to ExpensePlus, this process flow provides an efficient way to process money in and out of your organization's accounts. And if you follow this process flow, not only will it make your finance processes more streamlined and efficient, but it's a massive win for you when you come to do your bank reconciliation, because you don't need to key in lots of data in order to create your accounts. So purchases flow through being entered by your users. They flow through to receipt check, and those are checked by the appropriate people. Some expenditure will go then to approval if approval is required for your organization and for certain purchase types. Those payments can then be actioned, so you can make those payments on your online banking and you can mark them as paid within ExpensePlus. And those transactions will then find themselves sitting in our bank reconciliation module. This is a really good way that our purchases flow through different modules and work together and help us make things as efficient and streamlined as possible. And similarly, when we create invoices, if you create invoices within ExpensePlus, these modules talk to each other. So once you raise an invoice that's waiting to be paid, that will show in our bank reconciliation screen, and the reverse, which we'll see in a little bit. Once that bank transaction shows in our statement that an invoice has been paid, we can allocate it to an invoice, and within the invoicing module, that invoice will be shown as paid as well. It will no longer be outstanding and awaiting payment. And similarly with bank deposits, if we're recording a bank deposit, you're taking money to the bank. If you record that within ExpensePlus in a similar way to like a bank deposit slip, that will then appear in our bank reconciliation screen, and it can then be reconciled within the bank reconciliation screen. So we're not going to dive into all of these modules in much depth, because we have loads of other great lunch and learn sessions on these topics. So please do check those out. You can check those out on our training page, which we will send a link to at the end of the session. And we have separate ones on various different topics and modules within ExpensePlus. But we thought it'd be helpful to just show where the bank reconciliation module sits within this process flow as we get started. And so bank reconciliation really operates in two stages. We have the uploading of your bank transactions and the reconciling of your transactions. For most bank accounts, this first stage can be taken care for you. So if we go to our bank and cash accounts, you do have the option for lots of bank accounts to sign up to the automated feed via open banking. You can add your bank accounts and connect them in the bank and cash account settings screen. You can see this little button here. We have connected our Lloyds account, and you'll be able to go through that process with your accounts. That will automatically import transactions into ExpensePlus multiple times a day if you sign up to the automated feed. There are a few banks where that automated feed is not available, but that's not a problem, because you also might choose that you don't wish to be connected to the open banking feed, in which case you can upload your bank transactions instead. We're going to have a look at how you do that now. So to upload transactions efficiently, you can simply download your transactions from your online banking. So you will download a file that needs to be in a CSV format or an Excel format. And typically you will have no need to modify or even open this bank statement file. You'll be able to just download it to your computer, and then you'll be able to upload it within ExpensePlus. So if we navigate to the bank reconciliation module, we can go to a bank account that isn't connected to the automated feed. So we're going to go to Kingdom Bank here. We're going to pretend that we have we're able to upload our transactions. So we're going to select that file that we've downloaded. Now, Kingdom Bank isn't necessarily an example bank that do this, but we will pretend that we do have a statement that we've been able to download from them, and we're going to upload that file. In here, we're going to be able to specify the different transaction columns for this statement. So we're going to be able to tell ExpensePlus where the data is and what it means, basically. So we can see that this first column here from our upload is going to be the date column. So we're going to be able to choose that this column is the date, and ExpensePlus will remember this for future months if you continue to upload transactions, upload your statements manually. In here, this is going to be our bank description column here. This is our paid in column, and ExpensePlus has a paid in option here, as well as a paid out column here, which we can select. And then our spreadsheet also has the balance. Now, this is actually something that ExpensePlus will ignore. We don't need to register the balance in here because ExpensePlus will keep a running balance of your account. And we can submit this, and we can confirm that this transaction looks right. Upload these transactions, and this will ask us to just double check. And this is part of the reason why we don't import the balance from the spreadsheet, is that we want to make sure that ExpensePlus has the right balance that is the same as your bank account. So this pop-up is asking you to just double check that on this date that the balance for this account was this. Does that match the bank balance on your bank statement? And we can click yes. So that is how you can upload your statements. And then there is a third way. There is a third way to upload transactions. So this might be, for example, for a bank account where you get a paper statement. So it might be a savings account or something where there's only a couple or a handful of transactions that occur within it throughout the entire year, let alone each month. So this is definitely not something we'd recommend doing if this is your main bank account, but you can go and click that upload transactions button, and you can upload transactions manually here. If it says only got a paper statement, you can upload transactions in here. This is where we would do, you'd have to do all the work yourself. So you'd enter the date of that transaction. You can type in the description of what that bank transaction was. You can enter how much it was paid in or how much was paid out, and we can do this by adding several lines. So if you've got four bank transactions on your statement, on your paper statement, you can key them in manually here and upload those, and that will show in your bank statement screen within ExpensePlus. I'm not going to do that now, but that is how you would do that if you needed to. As we say, we would only recommend that you do this where you absolutely have to. It is slower and it can be is more prone to mistakes. So we only recommend that you do that if you absolutely have to. Okay, so that is the uploading of transactions to ExpensePlus. Then the second part is reconciling those transactions. Okay, so we are going to click into the match transactions screen within our account here, because this is where we can see the different ways that we can match our transactions. So in this screen, we can see our bank transactions on the left-hand table. These are all those transactions that have come from our bank statement or from the automated feed, or that we've manually uploaded, but hopefully not that many. And on the right-hand side, we can see a table with all the purchases that have been made, and as well as the invoices that have been raised within ExpensePlus. So like we said, that anything that has gone through the ExpensePlus process flow should be sitting here on the right hand side, ready to be reconciled. Okay, so the first way that we can reconcile transactions within ExpensePlus is with Quick Match, and this will cover it from month 2 and onwards. A lot of your transactions, potentially 50 to 60, maybe even 70% of your transactions can be quick matched because they will be recurring transactions. So like we say, this is only available for month 2. So if this is your first month using ExpensePlus, you will need to get ExpensePlus to remember these transactions before they can be quick matched in future months. But we'll explain how quick matching works, and then a little bit later we'll show how you can remember those transactions, whether that's in month one, or whether it is the first time that you have a new recurring transaction appearing in your bank statement. For certain banks, there are let's see what quick matching looks like first. So we're going to click on this quick match paid in transactions. And in this screen, we can see all of the transactions in our current bank statement haven't been matched yet, that have been recognized and remembered from previous months. So we can see that this name donation from Natalie Snow of this amount has been paid in. Now, the amount isn't remembered. So if this amount happens to be lower or higher in a particular month, so say Natalie gives us an extra £100 in May, if this was 550 for next month, this transaction could still be quick matched to the same fund and category that we've assigned here. Okay, because our quick match transactions are remembered based on the bank description, which we'll show you in a little bit. So we can see that this donation from Natalie Snow is going to be coded to our general fund, to our donations and donations regular category. And so we can, at the click of a button, reconcile all of these transactions, or if we need to, if we think actually this one's not quite right for this month, we need to have a look at that, we can exclude or manually exclude different donations, different transactions from our remembered transactions list before reconciling the rest. So we're going to say that all of these transactions are correct. We're happy with them all. We're going to match those selected, and that is going to significantly reduce the amount of transactions in this left-hand column for us, which is great. So those are your recurring transactions that happen month after month that you are happy to be coded to the same place again and again. Now, we can amend those remembered transactions. So if you've got one that you want to have a quick look at, and for example, you might have had on the bank statement, you might have an S May, but you might have a Sarah May and a Stephen May in your organization. So for example, if you have been reconciling these as Sarah May, but you actually have recently seen that those should have been assigned to Stephen May, so it's a different donor, then what we can do is we can go into this remembered transaction and we can change the details here. We can change the donor that these transactions are being reconciled to. Now, this would change all the allocations going forward, so from next month and beyond. However, it won't change any of the donations that have previously been reconciled to Sarah May. So if this was a situation that you were in, you would then need to manually edit the previously matched transactions, but past transactions will not be impacted. Okay, we can also delete remembered transactions from in here if we don't want them to be remembered anymore. We just click that little delete button here. We can view our remembered transactions by transaction type. So we're looking at our named donations, but you can also see our GADS donations that we want to be remembered. We've got income received, direct debits, salary payments, gift payments, processing fees, refunds, income repayment in there as well. Okay, so let's go back to our quick matching screen. We can also then have a look at our quick match paid out transactions, which operate in a really similar way. So we can go into our paid out transactions. We can have a look at the ones that are showing in our account currently. We can say that we're happy with all of those. We'll match those. And again, that will reduce down the number of transactions left for us to reconcile. So quick matching can reconcile a significant number of your transactions and speed up your bank reconciliation process, making it super efficient. If we are going, we will look at then, there is something to note about the description for those references, for those remembered transactions. So let's have a look at our remembered transactions. And we can see here in Sarah May's memorized bank reference, it is Sarah May. There are some banks like CAF or Lloyds who append transactions with a unique code. ExpensePlus knows about this and is able to still reconcile these and remember these transactions. So you don't need to worry if your transactions are appended by your bank with something unique. What is important, though, is that you can shorten these memorized back references, because some transactions will have like a date maybe assigned to the end of the reference. So some accounts might display like this. You might have Sarah May, October 25. Now, if you want this transaction to be remembered in the future, we're going to get rid of that end bit of the bank reference, because it's unlikely that in November 2025 that Sarah May's bank statement reference included October 25. So this is what we mean when we refer to shortening the bank reference. We just want to get rid of that bit if it is date specific. Okay, so that is quick matching. We will have a look at how to add a new remembered transaction in a little bit, but we're going to now look at the kind of one-to-one matching of transactions, which is for all of our transactions that have gone through the process flow within ExpensePlus. So we have a shortened number of transactions left on our left-hand column, and we've got some on our right-hand column, and we're basically looking at how which ones of these relate to the ones on the right-hand side, because that means all the details are already entered into ExpensePlus, and we can match them one-to-one. We call that one-to-one reconciliation. So ExpensePlus will automatically find a corresponding transaction on the right-hand table based on the amount of the transaction in the left-hand table. So if I select a transaction here, we've got our big boiler repairs. It's been paid out for £1,000. If I select that in the left-hand table, we can see that ExpensePlus has highlighted a transaction for £1,000 that it thinks might be a match for this transaction. We can see that it is. This is also for big boiler repairs. This is an invoice that we've already entered to be paid within ExpensePlus. We could drill into it if we'd like to. We can go and see that this is an invoice for big boiler repairs. It's for £1,000. That's fabulous. So we can go back and we can tick it again, and it will allow us to match that really nicely and quickly. Now, if you have, for example, a transaction in the left-hand column that is for an amount where there are multiple amounts in the right-hand column, so we've got this termly fees payment, we've got this invoice payment that has come in from Jane Jones, we can see that we have two transactions in the right-hand column. So ExpensePlus is going to highlight them both to highlight them to us, that we can see there's £40 here and £40 here. Which one, if any, does this relate to? Now we can see that this is from Jane Jones. So if we wanted to, we could drill into this invoice that's been issued, and we can see that this is to Jane Jones. We can see that it's for youth group termly fees. That's excellent. That's what we are expecting. So we can then reconcile those transactions one-to-one and match them. And that is all nice and tidy. Now, you might have an example where someone has paid an invoice like the one we've just seen, but actually they haven't paid the full invoice. So they're intending to pay it in multiple parts. So we can see we've got an invoice here for Jason Vasquez for £40. And if we look in our left-hand table at the bank transactions, we can see that Jason Vasquez has sent us £30. So if we tick this payment, it's not going to highlight Jason Vasquez's invoice because they are not for the same amount. But this is fine. In ExpensePlus, you can click this little plus button, and we can tell ExpensePlus that this is an invoice payment, and we're able to then switch to part allocation because this is £30, but the invoice is worth £40. So we can't just say that this is a full payment of the invoice. We're going to switch to part allocation. We can say that this is a £30 payment towards the £40 invoice, and click confirm. What that's going to do is it's going to remove the £30 bank transaction from the left-hand table because we have matched it successfully. And you can see here, this invoice for Jason Vasquez, the paid in amount, the due in amount has now been reduced to £10. And that will be reflected not just here in the invoice, but also in our invoicing module. As we said, ExpensePlus is really clever. It speaks to itself across different modules. So that is telling the invoicing module that £30 of Jason's invoice has been paid. There's £10 outstanding. So if we wanted to contact Jason, we could chase him for the remaining £10, but the £30 would have been acknowledged within ExpensePlus. Okay, so that is one-to-one matching of our transactions within ExpensePlus. We are now going to cover those transactions that are maybe 1 to 2% of your transactions where manual matching is going to need to take place. So these are for purchases that are maybe one-off, or they're not related to things that have been through the process flow. We've got an example here. So maybe this is an Amazon purchase and the purchase hasn't actually been entered through ExpensePlus, so it's not showing on here. What should really happen here is we should be asking the person who made this purchase to go and enter that purchase into ExpensePlus. But we're just going to use this example to help us go through the different transaction types that can be reconciled within ExpensePlus. So if you are reconciling one of these transactions one-to-one, you can click on it like I just did. So you can click on the main body of it, or if you hover near it, in fact, if I click the tick button, it will allow me to click the plus button here. That will allow us to reconcile the transaction as well. And so these are our transaction types for money that is going out of our account. So we have business card purchases. If you have business cards within your organization, this is where you're going to be able to reconcile these transactions. Now you can select which person in your organization this transaction belongs to, and that will basically assign this transaction to them to fill in further details for you, because they're the ones who have made the purchase. They know which funding category this should be recorded against. We really recommend, this is a top tip from ExpensePlus, we recommend having a category, if you do have credit cards, which you might title Z to be recoded or something like that, which we use as a temporary category, which basically is a place where we can assign transactions like business card purchases or credit card purchases. We can assign them there, waiting for the person that made that purchase to give the full details later and allocate them to the right place, because we might not be sure exactly what that purchase was or where it should be allocated against. Okay, so those are business card purchases. We also have direct debits or standing orders. So the first time that your direct debit or standing order appears on your bank statement, this is how we would recommend you reconcile them, because you're going to have this opportunity here to remember these transactions for future, which is what we spoke about. This is how you add a new remembered transaction. Okay, so you're going to click yes. We're going to keep it ticked if you want this transaction to be remembered. This is where you can amend the description, the bank description. So this is what has appeared on our bank statement. If we want this to be the description that is remembered, and therefore anything with this description on our bank statement will be remembered and allocated to the same funding category that we select here, then that's what we would leave in there. Now, this is remembered per bank account, so this would only be for this bank account. So if you had similar transactions going out of a different bank account, you'd need to remember that transaction separately. Okay, so this is where you can record direct debits, and we really recommend that you do that. This is the simplest and quickest way to reconcile these. You don't need to reconcile direct debits up front, although that is a possibility within ExpensePlus. Please do get in touch with our support team if you have any questions about that, or put them in the chat. We have time to answer those questions at the end of this session. Okay, so other expenditure options here, we've got expense payments, mileage payments, invoice payments, gifts and money. These are all purchase types that should have gone through the process flow within ExpensePlus. So these are here as kind of a backdoor option for you, but these shouldn't be used very often. You shouldn't have to register an expense payment at the point of bank reconciliation, because these should have gone through the process flow already, but they are there if required. And then we've got this bank/processing fee. Again, these can be remembered if this is a recurring transaction for future. So this might be, for example, if your bank charges you for something, so you might have a reward scheme with your bank account that they charge you monthly for, and you get benefits outside of your bank account, like insurance or something like that. These can be quick matched and remembered too. So we would select bank and processing fee. We'd be able to select the bank account, the bank, the supplier that this is for. We can change the description because this is not a book, but that is in here. We could change the fund and we can select the category within that fund that we want this to be allocated to, and we can click confirm, and that would reconcile that as a bank or processing fee. Now, some money going out of your bank account isn't necessarily expenditure. So we have in here transfer options. So you might be transferring money from this account into another bank account that you have in ExpensePlus. If that is the case, you would select this transfer to bank or card account, and ExpensePlus will allow you to select the corresponding account to which you are sending this money. So let's say that we're sending this to our savings account. Now, ExpensePlus requires you to have the bank statement uploaded for both accounts. So the transaction leaving this account and the transaction arriving in the Lloyds saving account, in order to match these. And if that were the case, it would show up in here and we'd be able to select it and confirm it. And that would reconcile this transaction as a transfer on both this account and the Lloyds savings account. You wouldn't have to do it twice. So that's how you can reconcile transfers to a bank or card account. It's a very similar process for payment processors, which we will have a look at in a little bit, but it's very similar to a transfer from a bank or card account. You can also reconcile this as a withdrawal of petty cash. In fact, I'm going to show you, I've got an example here. We've got a petty cash withdrawal transaction here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reconcile this as a withdrawal of petty cash. This allows you to select which petty cash tin you would like this to be allocated against. So we only have one at the moment, and James is going to take us through the details of adding more petty cash tins a little bit later on. I can click confirm, and that is going to send that. It's going to reconcile that within this account, and it's going to register within our petty cash account as well. So that's really helpful, and we'll have a look at that when we move on to the petty cash part of today's session. You might also then have, if we go back to our example, you might also have negative expenditure. Negative income. So this is money that's gone out of your account, but it's not expenditure, it's negative income. And the best example of that is kind of like a donation refund. So someone has sent you a donation, but you are refunding it. You can register that in here by selecting the appropriate donor and selecting the fund and category that donation was initially recorded against. It's the same with other types of income or payment of a credit note. So you can reconcile these transactions here. And then if you're operating on an accruals basis, if your organization accounts on an accruals basis rather than a receipts and payments option, then you will have a few other transaction types in here. So a loan repayment. So if you have any loans, you can say that this money going out is a loan repayment. We can select the loan in question. We can allocate how much of this is interest, and click confirm. You can also record any money that's invested in any investment funds that you happen to have. Okay, so those are our paid out options, the different transaction types for paid out transactions. Let's have a look at this. So this is obviously a donation, but we're going to use it just as an example for any paid in transaction types. So we can have a look at the different transaction types that we have for paid in transactions. So we've got our name donation. If this is a new name donation, then we can add the donor, or if it's a donor that we already know, but it's a new recurring transaction, we can select them from this menu here. We can add the fund and category. Again, we can register this as a recurring transaction and get it to be remembered. So that is how you reconcile a new name donation. A GADS donation, similarly, if this is income that is a donation that has come from either cash or contactless card and is under £30, And it could be from a named donor, as long as that named donor doesn't have a gift aid declaration. Then this can be claimed as GADS, that's Gift Aid Small Donation Scheme. There are other criteria, so it's worth checking out the HMRC website if you're questioning whether something can be claimed under the GAD scheme. But this is how you could claim it within ExpensePlus. You can select this as a GADS donation, record it. You enter the description, the fund, the category again, and this can be remembered. If this is a recurring cash donation from an individual, then you can remember this transaction as well. We've got invoice payments. We looked at this a little bit earlier. We showed you how we could allocate if it's a full matching invoice payment, then that would be 1-for-1 matching. That'd be quick and easy. If it's part allocation, we've had a look at that already. Then we've got other income, and other income basically covers what it says, any other income for your organization. So that might be event tickets that you've sold or interest in your bank account, things like that. You can record that in other income in here. From time to time, you might also find that you have transactions that come into your bank account that actually cover more than one thing. And if that is the case, we can select mixed income if we have multiple income types within one transaction. So an example of this might be that someone has paid an invoice, but they also have sent a donation on top of that invoice, and you need to record this separately. Okay, this will allow us to record that named donation in here. Say that was £10 of the £50, we could enter that in here, as well as then allocating the invoice, the £40 to the correct invoice. Okay, so that's the mixed income screen. It allows you to split an income across multiple transaction types. Okay, let's go back to that example just to look at the rest of the transaction types then. So again, we've got our transfer options. So these are the reverse of those transferring out from an account. So if you have money coming into this account, maybe from our savings account, this is how we would reconcile that in here. Again, from a payment processor account as well as this is how we would register the deposit of petty cash. So if we have taken petty cash from our petty cash tin, we have deposited it at the bank, and we want to reconcile this in ExpensePlus. We're going to use deposit of petty cash, and that will register within our bank account as well as within our petty cash account. Now, similarly, we've got options where this is not income, rather it is negative expenditure. So maybe expenditure we've already registered, like a supplier refund. So if this was an Amazon refund, for example, we've already paid Amazon, we've reconciled that outgoing transaction. Well, now we want to make sure that because we've got a refund, we don't want that item anymore. We want to make sure that the net expenditure for that product and for that funding category, most importantly, is at 0. So we're going to select supplier refund, make sure we select the same fund and the same category as we did for the initial payment, and that will help make sure that the expenditure for this is netted at 0. So that is a supplier refund. You've also got an expense repayment option here. So if someone has, if you have an expense repayment come in, again, that's not income, that is negative expenditure, and so we can record those details in here. And then similarly, we can, similarly to those paid out transactions, we've got the option to record a loan being received, and you can add a new loan if it is new, or you can select that it's part of an existing loan that's being paid in stages in here. As well as any investment returns. If you're fortunate enough to have any investment accounts and you have any of that investment return to your bank account, you can select those in here and register that within this screen. So that is our, in summary, that is our bank reconciliation module. So you've got those different options. The majority of your transactions can be quick matched if they are recurring transactions. Others can be matched 1-for-1 if they've been through the process flow, which is brilliant. And then you've got that manual matching process for the 1 to 2% of transactions that require manual intervention, and that can be done really easily as well. So I am going to stop there. I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to take us through payment processes.
Great. Thank you, Jack. So yes, I'm going to go through payment processors, how these work inside Expense Plus, and kind of give you a bit of an overview. This comes with a bit of a caveat that different payment processors do work slightly differently. And so if you want to find out about a specific payment processor after this session, then if you just head to the blue help icon in here, you come to our help guide. And then if you search for the name of the specific payment processor in question, so maybe that is stewardship you're using. So if you come in here, you can then look at the article about that. If that happens to be, for example, CAF that you're using, CAF Donate, then you can come and have a look at this in here. So do check out our help guide because they will provide you more specific guidance with screenshots and really kind of good level of detail for each different payment processor that you might be using. So I'm going to explain, though, the kind of two options that you really have with a kind of payment processor income. And when we're talking about payment processor income, we're talking about money collected sort of on your behalf, like a third party that sort of collects money and then pays it out into your bank account. And there are lots of these. There's about 15 that we support in Expense Plus. They might involve kind of CAS, stewardship, parish giving schemes, Stripe, SumUp, Square, Go Cardless. I've just named a few there. These are what we would describe as payment processors. Now, in most other software, when money hits your bank account from a payment processor, this is how you would reconcile it. And this is also an option inside Expense Plus. So this is option one that I'm going to take you through. So if we go to match transactions for our main bank account, we can see that we've got a Stripe payout here for £49.55. How are we going to reconcile this? Well, we can reconcile it manually. What we can't do is we can't use one of these top options here. Why can't we do that? Well, chances are this amount was from what wasn't just one thing. That's the first reason. But secondly, fees will have been deducted. And in fund accounting, it's really important that you don't just reconcile this as in this example as £49.55 income. That's called netting off. What you actually need to do is record the actual gross income, which probably would have been £50 or maybe slightly more, and the fees. So if you just record the 49.55 as income, you've done what's called netting off, and that's not the correct way to handle this. So what you should be doing is going mixed income, the option that Jack just mentioned, click confirm, and then you can break this amount, the 49.55, into the different things that it includes. Now you can either do this at a kind of very high level. Maybe we can come in here and we can record a line for £50 in here, and then down in the fees section, we can obviously record that we've had 45p deducted in fees. Obviously, that's quite a low amount. And then therefore our total is 49.55. That's kind of the minimum that you're doing, which is to split this amount into kind of one income line and one expenditure line. However, the amount of income, the income might not actually just relate to one fund and category. So you might find that you have to kind of do multiple lines. And actually, if these are donations, then you're probably going to want to keep a record of who donated. So actually, you could end up splitting this like this into lots of different donation lines. Maybe there's some event income in there. Maybe there's some fees. Maybe you need to code some of the fees to a different category. You get the idea. You can basically split this one amount using the mixed income screen into the different things, the different transactions that were part of that payout. And most payment processors like Stripe, you can drill into the payout and it will break down exactly what it includes, and you can then include the detail. This is option one. This is a valid option. It's nice and simple. The downside to it, though, is it's a lot of manual keying of transaction data in here, which is time consuming. You're likely to make a mistake, but it's really valid. This is typically what you do inside other accounting packages. And so this is option one, splitting a payout manually. An alternative to this option is to essentially set up your payment processor like it's a bank account. And in this case, that is actually what we've done. We've set up Stripe like it's a bank account inside here. And for some payment processors, you can actually just connect to an automated feed. So it literally does work like a bank account. It's bringing in your transactions all the time, and you can just reconcile them. The fact that money moves between this Stripe account and gets paid out to your bank account, well, that's just a movement of money. And I'll show you in a second how to reconcile it. But the beauty of this means that everything Jack's shown you in terms of how quick matching works with a bank account, that's all true of payment processors as well. So this is option two. And so this is a great option, particularly if you have kind of lots of transactions going through a particular payment processor. And so how would you reconcile if you're going to do this? Well, firstly, you would need to set up the payment processor. Secondly, if the payment processor has a kind of automated feed, you'd want to connect to it. If not, for example, with something like Parish Giving Scheme, you'd be able to go onto their online portal and download a kind of transactions report and upload that. So there's still a kind of bulk upload option, again, rather than saving you from having to sit there and split out all of the individual transactions. Again, if you're not sure how this works, for example, Parish Giving Scheme, just search our help guide. You can look at detailed guidance on where to get that report from, what it should involve, how to upload it, etc. I'm not going to cover that in detail. But essentially, we've set up our payment processor account, in this case, Stripe. In this particular example, we've connected it to the live feed. Then what we do inside our bank account, whenever money comes into our bank account like this, so for example, this 45.55, we're not splitting it using the mixed income option because we've actually got a separate account where this kind of money is being handled. What we're doing is selecting the payment processor option. We're selecting the account in question and then selecting the transaction in that account, click confirm, and that's us matched it. So that's like a bank-to-bank transfer. All we're saying has happened there is money's moved from our Stripe payment processor account into our bank account. Now let's look inside our Stripe account. We've got 24 transactions to match inside here. Do you remember how quick matching worked for a bank account? Well, that's exactly how it works here. So again, rather than having to split, manually enter all the different donations and all the different fees that were part of a payout, actually we can just use this quick match. And again, we can just match these transactions, which clearly come in every month or so. We can just match them using the match selected. Similarly with the fees, we've taught it once. It can then reconcile these fees for us, and we can again go match selected in here. For new ones that kind of haven't appeared before, we can then come in here, we can click on the particular donation. It's exactly the same as you would have seen in here. We can try and type Colin in here. He's not here. We can add him as a donor. We can record it and we can remember it. And so this works brilliantly. For things like fees, inside ExpensePlus, so here we've got a fee. When you click and reconcile a fee, you can reconcile it as a fee inside here, deducted by, we can just write Stripe inside here. We can then just give it a description. Now, this one has a description of new day fee because that's what's part of it. But if we wanted to simplify it, we could just simplify it all the way to fee. We select the fund that we want to code it to. We select the category we want it to code it to. And this is where we get to remember the transaction. Again, we can remember it. So it just does this for any fees relating to this kind of new day 2026. Or if we wanted to, we could shorten it further, in which case any fee inside our Stripe account is going to get reconciled like this. So you can slightly shorten the reference, and that would enable us to quick match all fees going forwards. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to tell it, look, this fee gets allocated there, click confirm, and then suddenly we can reconcile all other fees in the click of a button. And this works particularly well for event income. Can you see how we've got 5 different people that have kind of purchased tickets for our New Day conference here? So we can just come in here, we can click other income. It's not a donation, it's an other income. Income for New Day conference, general. We're going to go and find our New Day conference or festival income category. We're going to tell ExpensePlus, actually it knows itself, anything that has income, then this first bit of New Day. Notice how it doesn't include the person's name because that bit's probably not going to come back again. It's just remember the first part of this. We can click confirm, and then the beautifulness of this is in this case we've only got 4 others to match, but we can match all other conference income for this New Day conference exactly with a click of a button. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor. So if you're going to use option 2 with payment processors, it works a bit like a bank account and you're just reconciling as a payout from payment processor. And I've also shown you how event income works as well, where you can kind of just make sure the bit that's remembered is the bit that's always going to appear on all of your event income, and then how that can then be quick matched as well. Let's go and look at the view statements screen then. So we're going to go to our Lloyd's account. We're going to go to April, which is where Jack was kind of reconciling all of our transactions. And what you'll notice here is the left-hand table is your actual kind of bank statement. This should fully match with your bank statement. The right-hand table shows you where you've matched transactions to. Now, if you want to edit a transaction, typically you can simply click into the transaction and you can update the transaction details. You don't need to kind of unmatch or kind of do anything too complicated. If all that you need to do, for example, is change the fund or the category, or you've put the wrong donor name, that's really simple to change. However, where you've got the transaction type wrong, so you've called something a name donation, but actually it was other income, or maybe you've reconciled some money as income, but actually it was a supplier repayment, you will need to unmatch that transaction. That's super simple to do just by clicking the unmatch button to the right-hand side of the transaction. Just click on match. It says, do you want to unmatch it? We say yes. It just sends it back to the bank matching screen to be matched. So don't worry, if you have reconciled wrongly, you can unmatch and rematch. However, typically you don't need to do that, particularly if all that's wrong is one of the kind of transaction details. Next, we're going to talk about splitting a bank transaction. And splitting a bank transaction is typically not something you will need to do. And so that's worth noting. What I'm about to show you is not something you typically need to do. If you've got income that you need to split, like in that example of Stripe, actually you can split using the mixed income screen. But there are occasions where you may need to split a transaction. One example of this might be in the first kind of couple of months of using Expense Plus. If you work on an accruals basis, you may well get some money in from HMRC, and it may well be income for relating to gift aid that you've recorded in your last financial year and accrued for. Now, the money coming in may just be a straight accrual. It might be that you accrued for the full amount, in which case, when you're bank reconciling, you can just select that transaction type and go ahead and just record that it's reversal of an opening balance accrual, for example. But there might be that this amount, some of it was that, but some of it was something else, and you're struggling on the bank matching screen to work out how do I do this, because it's kind of two different transaction types at the same amount. 100 of it's just income in this year, and 800 of it in this example is relating to an open balance accrual. How do I do that? Well, you can come to the view statement screen that we're on. You can click the edit button to the right hand side, and in this example, we can split this amount. So we can split this amount coming in. We can make it 800 in there. We can make it 100 in here. So we're taking the £900 bank transaction, splitting it into two, and then this will allow us to kind of reconcile each part separately as we're wanting. So this is a useful example of how to split a transaction. Another example of how to split a transaction is where something funny has happened with the transaction. And what I mean by that, so let me just leave this screen. What I mean by that is maybe here we've got an Amazon refund for £10. Let's pretend it's not an Amazon refund. Let's just pretend it's income in. Maybe this person has donated £10, right? But they haven't, because what they actually did is, let's pretend they donated £10, but they said, I'm actually donating you 30, but actually I've got a £20 expense to claim, but I'm not going to claim the expense. I'm just going to donate you 10. That's all well and good, but in fund accounting, we need to account for the fact that they gave £10 in cash, that they gave £20, but they didn't give it because actually they didn't claim the expenditure. How would we deal with that? Well, again, we can come in here and we can split it. If we wanted to, we can split it into the £30 that they actually gave, the £20 in here that they never claimed, and then that allows us to actually split it. So when we're reconciling this, we can reconcile 30 as a named donation, 20 as an expense repayment. And essentially, we've made the kind of virtual bit of the transaction actually show as both kind of coming in and out. And so we're going to be able to reconcile properly and include this income and expenditure in our accounts. So they're just a couple of examples of splitting transactions. And I've also just mentioned there about virtual transactions, things like gifts in kind, etc. We may cover that in the question time at the end, but kind of that's helpful to know. The next thing I just want to cover before I hand over to James is just around bank reconciliation. So when you have finished reconciling everything on the kind of left-hand table, then obviously you've kind of caught up to date. It is worth saying it's worth checking the transactions on the right-hand table. In this example, the oldest transaction is only from a month ago, and it's an invoice payment. Now, we may want to follow up with this customer to say, look, you still owe us some money for this invoice, but we're not too worried. If we saw, for example, a business card purchase sitting on this right-hand table back from January, we need to do something about that, because we've done something wrong, essentially, because if it was marked as kind of paid in January, yet it's never appeared on our bank transactions on the left-hand side, it can't just infinitely sit there. So my kind of top tip here is just to make sure the transactions on the right-hand table are kind of like, they are things that you're expecting to be on the bank transactions on the left-hand table. If they're not, and you want to probably investigate those, if you decide actually this needs to go, this was a duplicate, you can then just click the edit button and click delete payment. But you don't want to infinitely leave kind of transactions on the right hand table that kind of shouldn't be there. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over to James at this point, who's going to take us through petty cash. As I do that, if you've got any questions that have come up so far, do pop them in the Zoom chat, because once James has talked through petty cash, we'll then go into a time of Q&A as we end today's session.
Great, thank you, Sam. So
We're just going to very briefly cover petty cash as we finish this session. And so, in your church or charity, you might have one or more petty cash boxes. For example, we've got one here. That's the office petty cash box. But you could have one for your youth group, for example, where it's used for the tuck shop or subs, or you could have one for your toddler group. And so in Expense Plus, we would recommend that each of your petty cash boxes that you have, you add here into this module. And to do that, you would go to your settings up in the top right hand corner. You'd go to your bank and cash accounts, and then you scroll down to the petty cash accounts. And within there, you can add new petty cash accounts. Within this section as well, you can add access. You can choose which users you want to have access to this specific petty cash account, or you can also do that from within the user roles settings that you might be familiar with. And that enables you to give access to all petty cash accounts from within there. So if we go back to our petty cash, Office petty cash, and you can access that through the left-hand menu, and there's a petty cash option down here. We would recommend that you record all income and all expenditure that goes in and out of that petty cash box. So let's start off with our expenditure. So if someone has made a purchase from this petty cash box, let's suppose they've bought some biscuits from Aldi for £5, and so that's going to be put to refreshments, some biscuits. Then you would enter that in here, or the person would enter that in here. We'd enter who it was that actually bought those biscuits. That's who the payee is. And in the same way that you would do for expenses, you can upload a receipt from this from your computer. I'm not going to do that for now. I'm just going to say that I'm going to do that later. And as you can see, that I've just done this, and I actually did a duplicate purchase earlier. So you can see now that £5 has been added from Aldi, and that has caused my petty cash balance to go down. It's very important that periodically, perhaps at the end of every month, depending on how many transactions you have, that you would check that this petty cash balance actually agrees to what you have in your petty cash box. You may also want to record some income in there. So perhaps if it was your youth, box, you might have some subs. So you might write the name of the person who has paid that, and perhaps you put in the term, summer term, and we put in these £10 from Bob. And then by doing that and submitting that, it will cause our balance to go up by £10. Jack has already covered within the bank reconciliation module what we might do if we wanted to top up our petty cash. So say we thought the petty cash box was running a bit low, and we wanted to take some out of our main bank account, and we've withdrawn that money, put it in the box. Jack already showed you that, and you can see here that it appears now in our petty cash transactions. And in the same way, we can also, if we decided, this petty cash balance is getting a bit too high, and we want to put £400 back, we could pay that back into our bank account. And again, we would reconcile that from the bank account side. I won't show you that because Jack already showed that earlier. There is also another way in which we can top up or pay in money from our petty cash, and that is through our bank deposit screen. So if you're doing a bank deposit, then you have the option at the bottom of each bank deposit to either retain cash, which you might use to top up your petty cash balance. So that would, of course, cause your actual bank deposit to go down. Or you could also say, do you know what? I'm going to take some petty cash from my box because I think it's got too much, and I'm going to put it into the bank with the bank deposit. We should note that what we have found is that a lot of organizations now, they often get rid of their petty cash boxes because of the process flow within ExpensePlus being very efficient and often meaning that people get reimbursed very quickly for their expenses. But if this was something that you wanted to use, then this is how you would do it. Finally, just before I hand back to Jack, I just want to mention one final thing, which relates to something that Sam said already, and that was around virtual transactions. So, say, for example, you have somebody who, I don't know, perhaps you've got an electrician in your church and they say, do you know what, I'm going to fix these lights and I'm not going to charge you for that. I would have normally charged £200, but I'm not going to charge you for that. And so if you work on an accruals basis, and that's important to note, this only applies for those on accruals, then you could create a petty cash tin that was called donated expenses or something along those lines. And you could create virtual transactions that they haven't actually occurred in one sense in real life, but we want to be able to record them as income and expenditure in our accounts. So in that case, we'd have a petty cash tin set up, we'd record the expenditure of £200 to that electrician, and at the same time, we would also record an income of £200 that's exactly equal to what has been donated by this electrician. And that would, of course, cause our petty cash balance to stay at zero, but it would record an income and an expenditure in our accounts. So that's everything from me. I'm going to hand back to Jack.
Thanks, James. That was great. Thanks for outlining petty cash. We have had a couple of questions come in, so I'm going to hand over to Sam. We've got a couple of questions. So one is, how do we reconcile gift aid income that's coming from HMRC?
Great. Yes. So let's just cover this because there are two answers to this question. It's not a trick question about the sound of it, but the answer depends on whether you work on an accruals basis and whether you chose to auto accrue the gift aid income when you claimed it through the gift aid kind of module inside Expense Plus. So if you work on an accruals basis, you do have auto accruals enabled, you did claim it through our gift aid module, and you did choose to auto accrue it, which sounds like a lot of ifs, but typically would be the case. Then when money comes into your bank account, so this £900 comes into our bank account, when you click on this pop-up, there would be an additional option that's squeezed in here between other income and mixed income called gift aid income. And it's important that you do use that option, because if you don't, then the accrual will always forevermore stay outstanding. And you'll notice in your financial reports that you have double counted that income. It got counted for when it was accrued, and it got counted for as you wrongly recorded it as other income. So the note here is, if you use an accruals basis and you auto accrued for your gift aid, then make sure you select the option which isn't showing on this example environment, but the one called gift aid income. Otherwise, the answer is you record it as other income just inside here. You can obviously allocate it as you would like to. You can even remember it. Probably it's worth doing. Although it is worth noting that gift aid income does need to get allocated to the funds that it relates to, which is why you'll find inside our gift aid screen that although you probably think, oh, I can send one gift aid claim for my food bank fund, my general fund, and my building fund, you'll find that Expense Plus deliberately splits it into three. Why? Because each one needs to be allocated to the same fund that the donations were given inside. You can't just allocate the gift aid off of your food bank restricted donations to your general fund unless all of the donors have individually agreed to that. So it is worth noting that you do need to make sure you select the fund and category correctly. However, if you've auto accrued for it, you don't need to worry, because Expense Plus already knows the fund it relates to. It already has the income, and essentially by using the option I just mentioned, it will reverse out that accrual. So hopefully that answers the question, Jack.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. And then we just had one follow-up question, just clarifying, how should GAD's donations be recorded within Expense Plus? Should they be allocated to the named donation, or just clear it up, I guess.
Yeah, and this is a really good one, because GADs typically, if you're not familiar with what GADs is, then do either message our support team or check out our blog, because we have a brilliant blog that kind of covers what GADs is. Where GADs relates to, for example, if you're a church and you have a kind of cash offering where people donate into that offering, you can record that as GADs. And if that were the case, then either if the whole lot was GADs, then I'm going to click on this transaction. Then, of course, if all of this was kind of GADs that have been banked, then you could record it as GADs. Or if not, you can go to the mixed incomes, because maybe there was some name donations that you banked at the same time, mixed income or bank deposit will allow you to allocate that. And so that GADS is to do with kind of loose cash that kind of comes in. And as long as there's no discernible gift that is kind of more than £30, i.e. if there was an envelope with 100 in, then you shouldn't be GADSing that. But overall, you can, if it's all just loose cash and it comes to £200, you can GADS the whole lot. And so that would be where you choose the GADS option. Now, GADS is a little bit more nuanced than that. It's not just cash, it's also contactless card donation. So if you've got a card reader and as long as, again, the amount donated in each transaction is not more than £30, then as long as it's a kind of like contactless card reader, not an online kind of thing, but a kind of like people tap onto it, then you can also claim that under GADS. And so that would be, again, GADS donation, but you don't know who the donor is, chances are, so you can just GADS that. If, however, you do know who the donor is, then you need to not be using the GADS option. You need to be using the named donation option inside here. And before you kind of shout at me if you understand your GADS rules correctly and say, yeah, but if the named donor doesn't have a gift aid declaration, we can GADS that too. And that is, of course, true as long as it's cash or contactless card and isn't more than £30 in an individual donation. ExpensePlus will do this for you. So my kind of bottom line, the best way to remember it is GADS for where it is a donation. It's eligible under the GADS scheme because it was cash or contactless card and you don't know the donor name. Otherwise, name donation where you do know the donor name and the gift aid module is clever enough to work out, as long as the method is correct, the amount is correct, it will include that as GADS for you. So hopefully that clarifies, Jack.